Okay, we're live.
Okay, thank you. Right, well, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining the London TravelWatch board meeting, and to any members of the public who are watching, welcome. So we're going to start the agenda immediately. We'll run through till probably 12 o'clock, and then we will go into confidential session, but the next 2 hours will be a public session. I'll just start. We don't have any apologies for absence, so that's good. And I can just run through a little bit on my activities and a bit of Transport Focus update. And we have Anthony Smith here from Transport Focus, who may well want to add a little. In terms of the chair's activities, one of the main focuses for the last month or so has been planning the appointments of new board members for London TravelWatch. I've had discussions with members of the Assembly and particularly the Secretariat there. There is a recruitment process going on now, or starting. The recruitment agencies are being briefed, and we hope to have some more information on that in the next couple of weeks or so, with a view to putting out some adverts, I would hope early July. If that can be done, then obviously we can get a process going and hopefully appoint new members by September would be the ideal situation. Obviously everything dependent on timings, but that's what we're hoping to do. Emma, I don't know if there's anything you particularly want to add on that, because I know you've had some contact with the GLA, but does that cover?
Yeah, pretty much, Chair. There's still a final kind of funding for the recruitment is still being finalised at the moment, but yeah, they've chosen an agency, so hopefully that will all be starting quite soon. I agree with you.
Right. Okay. So that's just an update on that. In terms of Transport Focus work, clearly there's been quite a lot of focus on the rail white paper that has been published since we last met, and the discussions are continuing, and Anthony in particular will be heavily involved in those discussions with the department as Great British Railways is created and a new body formed. Anthony, I don't know if there's anything you want to say this public session on that, but in terms of where discussions have reached.
Just to say, Chairman, that we've started talking to the department about the detail of the white paper and the transition, both in terms of what it means for passengers and the passenger voice in the process, and also what it means for Transport Focus and London TravelWatch in terms of representing the passenger voice. So early days, but very happy to return to say more about it once a bit more details known.
Okay, thanks very much for that. And then just lastly, to let people know, really just for the record, you'll be aware that the inquest into the Sandilands tram crash is ongoing, and that's going to be continuing for a number of weeks. John Cartledge, who does some work for London TravelWatch, has been our representative there, because we have had input into safety discussions around tram safety, and John is reporting back to me as things come through the inquest. So that will continue through July. Actually, we're not expecting anything in terms of new safety decisions, because that was actually dealt with previously by the safety investigators. But just so you're aware, we are represented at that inquest. So John will keep in contact with me on that. Okay. So that's really where we are in terms of Chair's activities, unless there's any questions or comments. Okay. Well, perhaps we can move on then to the report of the director from Emma Gibson.
Hello there. Before I start, I have to say that I do have to pop out of this board meeting just for a short while. Around kind of 11:15, I'm doing a talk, quick introduction at a conference. So then I'll be back again. But I just wanted to mention that before I forget, in case you wondered where I'd gone. So yeah, in terms of the director's report, if you've seen the paper, you'll have seen the dashboard, which we're using to report back on how we're meeting our main objectives. I think it's looking pretty good this time at the moment. I'm quite happy with the things that are kind of green and amber and the things that haven't yet started yet. So looking at things around kind of campaigns and advocacy, a lot of our asks that we put forward in the election period were reflected in various mayoral manifestos, which we were really happy about. And in terms of Sadiq Khan's manifesto, who obviously was the winner, all of our asks, including those on the bus, were in his manifesto, except the ask around retaining the ability to pay by cash on the transport network. So that's kind of 3 out of 4, which isn't too bad. And we're continuing to have influence with our report, The Journey Ahead, and we've presented those findings around what passengers want from their future transport network at a number of conferences. And one of the themes that was picked up in that future transport research, The Journey Ahead, was that the issue of personal security came up much more strongly than we were anticipating across a number of groups. And then, of course, earlier this year, we had the tragic murder of Sarah Everard in London, after which there was an outpouring of concern and stories about people who don't feel safe when they're moving around London. So as a result, we've embarked on a new project, which is a research project to find out what it is makes people feel unsafe when they're travelling around London and what we need to do about it. So that's a new piece of work that I wouldn't have mentioned last time we met. So in terms of our other projects, our project on the bus is starting quite soon, and we're pulling together a whole group of different interested parties who are interested in increasing bus ridership on the 6th of July to get together and talk about how we could work together to make that happen. And we're kind of knocking on a slightly kind of open door, because I said the Mayor of London has put measures in his manifesto, both to increase bus priority on the roads in London, but also to improve bus services in outer London. And TfL have a bus action recovery plan that they've been consulting on with people at the moment. So there's the kind of the atmosphere in which we're running this project is kind of conducive to making some progress, we think. We're also continuing to work on the recovery and working out what it is that people in London need in order to make them feel confident about coming back to public transport. And I'm going to be speaking at 11:30 at a London First conference, which is all about that, is about what do passengers need in order to make them feel kind of confident and safe to come back to the public transport network. And you might have seen that we did an analysis recently of various transport apps to see which of them provided the best information to passengers on how busy they can expect services to be, because social distancing is still the number one concern for people coming back to public transport. So that's on our advocacy. In terms of relationships, we still had some influence with TfL in this period. We were particularly happy that they took on board our suggestion that they talk more about ventilation on their various modes of transport, but specifically on the tube, where they have a good story to tell about how often fresh air is circulated on the tube. And as a result, they made a video for their passengers, which I've seen on their website and also attached to some of their emails. We had a bittersweet win on convincing TfL to decrease the auto top-up limit on Oyster cards down to £10. We were really happy that we persuaded them to do it, but not very happy that it won't be brought in before January of next year, considering that our argument was that people really, really struggling financially during the crisis need this to happen. So we'll keep seeing whether there's any way we can get them to reconsider that one. Our collaboration with Transport for all continues to be really strong, and we're really benefiting from the lived experience of disabled people as part of our work. So there are a number of areas where we're collaborating with them on at the moment. And in terms of our collaboration with new organisations, through the personal security work, we're collaborating with the Young Women's Trust. We did a focus group with them this week on the personal securities work. We're also collaborating with the Girls Friendly Society on the personal security work, and we've had a good conversation with Which, who want to get involved in our campaign to save the ability to pay by cash on the transport network. And finally, our collaboration with Transport Focus is still going really strong. We're working out together how we can best represent passengers as a result of the changes in the to the rail structure in the Williams-Shapps review, making sure that we're representing passengers as best we can in and around London. Transport Focus are now providing all of our finance, IT and HR services, and we're continuing to get really, really useful intelligence from them from around the country about things that are going on, and especially in terms of kind of really positive initiatives for encouraging passengers back onto public transport that really help us to kind of advocate for passengers in London. So just in other news, we've got a hybrid working plan now that we're trialling out when the time is ready, which probably looks like maybe September, for getting everybody back to the office. And in kind of slightly older news, the campaign that we initiated last year to save free under 18s travel won an award, and we're really happy to see that. So I think that's my synopsis of the main features of my report. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Okay, thanks, Emma. It's a lot. There's no quiet summer for you and the team. Clearly, there's plenty going on, so that's really helpful. Any questions for Emma? Jackie.
Thank you. Yeah, some really good stuff there, really impressive stuff. I'm assuming the reason relationships with the Assembly is red is because there's lots of new Assembly members, and so we haven't created those relationships yet. So that's something ongoing.
Yeah, that's the one where we want to do a satisfaction survey with them like we did last year, but we're going to do it in the autumn, so that it's exactly a year away. It's
not because relationships are bad, it's because they're in progress and there's new people. And the question, which I should know the answer to, I know that, which is we initiated the zip card scheme, but somebody else got the award, as I understand it, because your report doesn't say we won an award. So,
no, it wasn't us. It was actually the person that won the award was a young person.
Oh, it was an individual.
Joshua, for his petition that he launched. But obviously, what London TravelWatch did was build a wide coalition of organisations who campaigned, including Joshua. But he won the award for his campaigning in particular.
Oh, well, it's always good when an individual wins awards, isn't it, rather than an organisation. So we can't be churlish about that.
That's right.
Thanks, Emma.
Any other questions? Anthony, I know that you do need to leave us for another meeting, but Anthony, is there anything you wanted to add or
Thank you, Chair. Yes, probably just a couple of things. The weekly omnibus survey that we carry out across Great Britain about the attitudes of people who are travelling or who are thinking about travelling continues. Across all the different modes of transport, we're seeing satisfaction slightly starting to dip as passenger numbers go up. I suppose that's inevitable to a degree, given that at the moment satisfaction is very much driven by social distancing, face covering adherence and cleanliness. And the announcement yesterday, of course, is just going to make the next 4 weeks painful in that respect. So I think that a degree of honesty is needed by government and transport operators that social distancing is going to be more difficult as more people turn up. And it's very much an individual decision about what people can tolerate and not. But it's quite marked that we're starting to see a little bit of a dip. Let's see if it's a trend with next weekend's survey. And then secondly, we are just finishing pulling together the evidence for the review into social distancing, which the government is still undertaking separately to the unlocking processes. And hopefully we'll be able to publish that, I think, probably next week, which should be quite interesting. So some good qualitative work about what people see as the future of wearing face coverings, the future of social distancing, etc., etc. So still some strong evidence coming through there. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that. And yes, I think clearly the collaboration over the omnibus has been very successful it's over a year now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Time flies. But I think as people are returning to work, there's quite a likelihood we're going to see the trends in London, perhaps before other parts of the country. And I think anything that we pick up through the omnibus for London might well be useful in terms of work that you're doing elsewhere, Anthony. And I know these are different parts of the country, different needs, but I think we'll be able to see some trends perhaps quite early in London, and we already are doing.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody, and goodbye at this point.
Thank you very
Good
much.
to see you all again. Thank you.
Thanks
Goodbye.
for joining us, actually. And Emma, just coming back to the report, clearly some really good work going on around the bus campaign, and you're going to be launching that next month, really. Does that affect the work that you're going to be doing, or can that continue regardless through July?
Yeah, no, I don't think there's any stop on that. I mean, I think there are kind of, related issues potentially around service cuts to buses, but also kind of train and tube that could happen, which will impact on that work. But no, I think the idea of bus priority has probably never been more important to talk about than it is now, because if you can make journey times quicker on the bus, then potentially you don't need as many buses, and that's a money saving thing. So it's a win-win all round. So I think that the time is right for having that conversation.
Yeah, because I think being involved in this, it isn't just about maintaining services, it's about efficiency of services, as you're saying, Emma. We recognise all the financial constraints that TfL face and indeed the government are going to face, but it doesn't, the easy way perhaps is just to cut services and just take out 10%. The smart thing, of course, is to get the right savings in the right places, and possibly even the need to bolster some services if that's going to be more useful to passengers. So I think the bus campaign is going to be very timely for this, because there will be moves to reduce, understandably, for financial reasons, but I think we've got an opportunity here to really campaign on behalf of users, to say these are going to be long-term decisions, and they shouldn't be taken too hastily, and they need to be done really with the view of organisations like ourselves sort of having a good, strong input into that. Okay, any other questions for Emma? Yeah. It's very clear. Thanks, Emma, and thanks for all the work that's going on, and do thank the team, because it's not been easy trying to do all this remotely, but no one has sort of let up. The work is carried on regardless of the difficulties of working. So thanks for that. Okay. Could we move on to the climate change and role of London TravelWatch, which again is for you, Emma. So
yes, and I'm doing lots of talking this morning.
We'll get value from you before you have to leave us briefly.
So hopefully I set things out kind of fairly clearly in this paper, but just a kind of brief recap. I don't need to tell you that climate change is on the agenda more than it ever has been. I've worked on this issue for 25 years, and it's never been as talked about as it is this year. And all organisations are being encouraged, firstly, to get their own house in order in terms of looking at their kind of carbon footprint and the impact of the work that they do, but also to look at what they can do to add their voice to the growing sense of urgency to act. So, in the spirit of that, London TravelWatch are doing their own internal audit, a sustainability audit, just looking at whether there's anything in our operations that we could do better, that could be energy conserving, for example. But we also want to look at what we're doing, outwardly. And, by default, a lot of London TravelWatch's work continues to help it to contributes rather to helping decarbonise transport. And I think Anthony once said to me something like, you know, the best thing you can do to help climate change is make sure the trains run on time. You know, and there's some truth to that. Just what we do does help to, you know, encourage people to use public transport rather than their cars. But I think we could go a bit further than that by actively adding a new criteria to how we select our future projects. And that doesn't mean that all of our projects have to lead to the decarbonisation of transport, but it means that we will kind of more actively and deliberately consider that when we're choosing projects. So my suggestion is that we add in a sentence to our current criteria, which says, you know, that addresses whether working on this issue will help to contribute to the decarbonisation of transport in London. So that's my introduction. So I'm both interested in whether that is something that you think would be a good idea, but also whether there are any ideas in terms of what London TravelWatch can do in terms of helping out the fight against climate change that we haven't thought of already, that you might be able to kind of add into the mix.
Okay, thanks very much, Anna. That's really very helpful, and you've set it out clearly. So it really is. For this, some of the things will perhaps be, to some extent will be assumed that we would be taking into consideration climate matters, but we've never stated it, and I think this is the right time to be able to say this is something that will be considered as part of the criteria that we look at. But I'm interested in people's thoughts, both as to whether that's the right way forward, but also, if so, how we do that positively and in a meaningful way. Any particular comments? So I've lost you as a group there. Just 1 second. Sorry, did anyone have their hand up then? Sorry, Laura. Thank you.
Thanks, Arthur. Go back to the less technical version of waving. Yeah, so firstly, I thank you for the report, Emma. I think it's really helpful to see it set out like that and good to see what's already being done. But I do think it does make sense to add a criteria now that it's part of the consideration to how we plan work going forward. One additional thought was just how we might look at the sort of immediate work plan, because that obviously makes sense for work going forward, but there are kind of particular issues around public transport and recovery, as you touched on earlier at the moment. Is there anything else in the work we currently have on the agenda that should be sort of thought about through this lens, or anything else you think we need to do in the sort of near term to make sure we pick up what would have been picked up had we had that criteria previously?
Yeah, thanks for your support on that, Laura. Yeah, it's a really, really good question, and I think that pretty much everything in our business plan that we agreed at the beginning of the year probably does fairly kind of naturally fit with this criteria anyway. But I think the only project that probably wouldn't would actually be the new piece of work that we've picked up around personal security. I mean, you could arguably say, you know, the safer people feel when they're travelling around London, the more likely they are to get out and about. But I think that's probably a bit of a kind of a tenuous link. And we approved that project, I guess, after I'd had this thought about adding in a new criteria. So, but that's a kind of a time-bound piece of work. But I guess, you know, it might be that if we were to look at our projects through this lens in future, you know, would that project have got through or not? I'm not really sure. It ticks lots of other boxes. But yeah, I think everything else, including, you know, the bus being the centerpiece of our work and the recovery work in general being about how to get attract more people back onto public transport, I think does kind of fit pretty well with the decarbonisation objective. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Karen.
Thanks, Arthur. Yeah, I think it's a good idea. You're right. It's very topical at the moment, and I think it's quite easy for us to take a position whereby we're saying, you know, public transport is much better for the environment than using a car. I think the challenge comes when you're looking at the range of public transport, and actually, you know, why aren't we then doing more around cycling, because that's the lowest carbon footprint that you can have. And so I think it will become more complex when we're looking at the trade-offs between what campaigns we should support, because as well as carbon, there's issues around cost, there's issues around availability for people, and people don't just make a choice based on this is the lowest carbon option for me. And so I'm supportive of it, but I think as time goes on, we may need to refine how we select our projects, and I don't think that this can be the overarching criteria at the moment, but supportive of including it, and we can see how it works out.
Thanks, Karen. That's really useful.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key is that, this isn't the sort of this isn't the veto on all work that we do. But it's an important part, and I think considering it alongside our other work is going to be important. Yeah, I'm sure at some stage there will be attention, and that's the opportunity to have a full discussion on it. Any other thoughts on this? Just one question, Emma, from me. Does this fit in with Transport Focus's own criteria, or are they doing this at the same time, or what's the thinking? Or is this something very specifically that we're going to do on our own?
Yeah, I mean, Transport Focus are having their own conversation, and they have been having it for over a year, I would say. I was first involved in that conversation before, the pandemic started, about decarbonisation and what Transport Focus's role should be in that. They haven't really kind of concluded that conversation. They're in a different situation because they're funded both to improve the experience of rail passengers and bus passengers, but also road users. They're funded by Highways England, so it makes the conversation more difficult for them.
Yeah.
One of the things that they've been doing recently is delving more into electric vehicles and what the consumer issues are around electric vehicles, but I don't think that they've fully really worked out yet how they're going to approach the issue of climate change.
No. Okay. Well, I think it's great that we're taking this step, and a credit to you, Emma. Obviously, with your background, you've got deep knowledge of the issues. So I think you'll give us new sort of cause for thought on some of these issues as well. So I think it'll be very helpful to have this as part of the criteria. Good. Sorry, Jackie.
Yeah, I mean,
and then I think you, Alan. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't see Alan's hand. Sorry, I agree with what Karen said, and I guess the important thing will be the development of our grid of how we decide what issues we're going to campaign on or not, and where the various criteria are on that, because there'll be, as Karen said, there might be some conflicts between the impact on poverty and the impact on the environment, or whatever it is. So it's about developing our ways of grading or scoring those issues that we're going to be campaigning on. I think is quite important. But no, I don't at all disagree with this. Should be something that's on our radar strongly.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Alan.
It clearly is important, and I want to echo what a number of other members have already said. I wonder whether there's a slightly bigger scope to this, that it's not just about climate change, but about environmental impact. So I'm particularly thinking about, as we move towards more electric vehicles, and particularly micro-mobility, there's an impact there in not only manufacturing, but things like battery technologies and the chemicals used within those. So I'm just wondering whether there's a slightly bigger scope that we ought to be thinking about when we're weighing up, when we're scoring this, really, that's all.
Yeah, you make a really good point, Alan, and that was one of the points I raised at the Transport Focus's electric vehicle webinar that they had a couple of months ago was around how electric vehicles aren't going to solve all the problems in terms of, congestion, decarbonisation, but also, road space, but also to do with the kind of the finite supply of raw materials for batteries. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, at this stage, are you proposing that we maybe kind of amend that wording to make it broader, or do you think it's maybe just something we bear in mind and we come back to another time?
I think it's probably something we need to keep an eye on and come back to. So I'm not sure at the moment we've got the data to enable us to make those decisions properly. So I'm thinking, for example, particularly of the scooter trials in Norwich, which I believe have radically reduced the number of car journeys within Norwich itself.
Yeah.
So whilst the impact on, as you say, the battery manufacturer is a negative on that scale, actually the reduced impact of cars, the reduced impact of accidents, it's a complicated thought process that we need to go through.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that will evolve over the next year or so.
Yeah, I agree with you, Alan. And e-scooters in particular is probably a really good example of where really quite a complex issue. So I think you're right. I think I read that 1 in 5 of the journeys in, I think it was Norwich, were people actually not using their car and using an e-scooter as a trial, which is really significant, isn't it? But with e-scooters, we're balancing also the needs of, disabled people, especially kind of blind and partially sighted people, who are really worried about the e-scooters. So yeah, it's a classic example of where we need to kind of balance lots and lots of different interests to come out with a position, and probably we'll have to do that at some point.
Yeah, I think it will. It will create some of these challenges, and probably usefully, I think, for us to really try and think things in the round. Some things that we've talked about before in terms of surface access to airports is perhaps another example where we would there's a sort of consequence, I suppose, where what we might be talking about might be tube access to Heathrow or whatever, but clearly you might say there's a wider issue around air travel and the like. Now, we don't have a remit for actual air travel itself, but what is our view, what is our role in terms of discussing access to airports and the consequence, in terms of the climate consequences of those changes. So probably not an immediate issue because there's not so much air travel, but in due course that will come back, I'm sure, onto the horizons. So I think these are things, it'll alter the way that we discuss things a bit, and I think in a good way, because it'll give us a slightly broader view of transport. And just a question: how would we be getting? In this early days, I know we're only just starting this, but how would we be getting our information coming through? Because the transport groups that we normally would deal with, and perhaps the organisations that we normally deal with, might not be so conscious of the climate. We're conscious, but might not be so active around climate change. Are you suggesting in any way that we'd be working with other organisations to improve our knowledge and our ability to discuss these things?
I mean, yeah, Arthur, we're already working with a much wider range of organisations that we probably have done before. Mm-hmm. And we've got a closer relationship with the Campaign for Better Transport, for example. We're becoming much closer with cycling and walking groups than we have done before. So I don't think that's a danger. I think we're pretty well kind of clued into all of the issues. I can't remember what point I was about to make now, but yes, I know what it was. But also, the government itself has put decarbonisation at the heart of its policymaking agenda, and TfL are also very interested. you know, in decarbonisation, for example, electrifying the whole bus fleet. The Mayor of London has got a very strong kind of targets towards decarbonising transport. So I think that, you know, in a way we're adding our voice to a kind of, you know, a mix of all of the kind of major kind of influencers and decision makers who are already looking at this issue.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, no, I think it's absolutely the right time, and as you say, this is the year. If you're going to if you didn't do it this year, you're probably not going to do it at all. So this is the right time.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thank you. Good paper. Good discussion. Thank you for that. Right. Can we move on then to the collaboration agreement review, which is something we did say we would do at the time that the collaboration agreement was created back in February last year. We said after a year we would review it, and so this is the result of that. This report that you have from Anthony and Emma. First of all, any particular thoughts? I can talk through it if you wish, but I'm sure it's been read, so I don't need to do that. But is any particular thoughts around the report itself?
If it's useful, I can give a couple of minutes of background on how we reviewed it and what the kind of any of the sticky areas were.
That'll be helpful, Emma. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, I mean, as you know, this collaboration agreement, it was being written before I arrived and was put in place just after I arrived. So it was all kind of part of my newness, really, to London TravelWatch. And so a group of us got together a few months ago to have a look at the collaboration agreement. How was it standing up? Was it working? Had it panned out as expected? And, you know, all of us were quite surprised actually that it had panned out largely as we expected. And we were particularly surprised by our guesstimates about the hours swap, as we call it. So with London TravelWatch taking over Transport Focus's casework, and in return, we have people at Transport Focus providing our finance, IT, and now our HR support. And we made a kind of a guess really as to, you know, whether those hours were going to balance out as fairly equal, and they did. We found out that our predictions were actually really pretty accurate. So we've more or less kind of kept them as they are in the new collaboration agreement. And also it was good to kind of get a sense of, in those conversations, Transport Focus gave us a 5-star rating for how we were handling their casework, which is really good, which shows that their expectations have been met. And our expectations have certainly been met in terms of the services that they're providing us. So we made some tweaks to some areas that hadn't kind of quite panned out as we expected. I think there was an expectation that we would get some governance support from Transport Focus in exchange for them getting some comms support. That didn't really kind of quite work out due to some staffing changes at Transport Focus. So we've actually taken that out of the collaboration agreement because we don't really think that's needed. We made some changes to the chief executive's role description because the way that his role was panning out didn't really kind of reflect the reality 1 year on. And we just clarified and kind of tightened up some of the wording around IT and finance, for example, now that Transport Focus are providing all of our finance services, not just the management. So I think there was a feeling in general that we've had some really good successes as a partnership, which is documented in the papers that we sent, and you know, all of the parties in the conversation to update in the collaboration agreement were really happy with the changes and feel it's good to go. So I think that's what I would say by way of introduction.
Thanks very much, Emma. That really is useful. And you know, bearing in mind where we started, which it had to be a little bit of a guess as to how we were going to take this forward. And then obviously with the pandemic, everything was changed within about 30 days of the agreement being signed. So I think the fact that there've been so many both external and internal successes during that time, I think is remarkable, and credit to both teams, I think, in finding pragmatic solutions sometimes to unexpected challenges. I think we've certainly had the view from the Assembly that the partnership has been working well, and that's good. Of course, they would always like more, and they want to see possible more efficiencies if that's possible. But also, I think it's about the outputs that we have, and I think through the omnibus survey and other areas, we've been able to show a great value to users. So I think that's been really good in the first year. I think this review just gives an opportunity, just as Anna says, to tweak one or two things, just to make sure things that were probably written in really just on the basis of, well, let's see how it works. We now actually have some information, and we can actually see how things have worked. And with those in mind, I think it's been good just to make some changes. And certainly Transport Focus, I think, have been very open to Emma's suggestions of change. They've not been resistant. So I think that's worked well. The key in all this, and it was right at the start, we did, you may remember from discussions, we wanted to make sure that London TravelWatch wasn't sort of subsumed into Transport Focus. It's absolutely crucial that we remain independent, not least because we report to the Assembly. But in any case, some of the issues affecting London travellers can be quite different from other parts of the country. So I think what I'm really pleased about this first year is that we have retained that independence while being partners, and that's quite a difficult line to tread sometimes, but I think Emma and the team have done that really well. Where we've had something to say that is perhaps distinct from Transport Focus, we've been able to say it, and I think we need to carry on being able to do that. Any questions or comments for Emma?
No, I think it's a helpful amendment. All partnerships and relationships ebb and flow, and it was never going to be a fixed and static agreement. The changes seem sensible and pragmatic, and I dare say that we'll be looking at it again as things evolve for Transport Focus. So I'm happy to support them.
Okay, Laura. Sorry, I did see your electronic hand as well.
Don't worry. Thank you. And actually, it's a point that builds on Karen's. I was going to make the same observation about as Transport Focus establishes exactly what it will look like going forward as a result of the Williams review thinking. No doubt we will need to adjust slightly in terms of how this agreement sits more widely. But in the interim, I think those changes are very sensible.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts? Has that covered it? The only thing we touched on it a little bit earlier with Anthony. Clearly, as we have more detail of the railway white paper and the role of Transport Focus within the new Great British Railways setup, that may change things a bit. We just don't know, and time will tell on that. But I think as long as we know what our position is in terms of how we work with the Assembly and what our responsibilities are, that they clearly have to be retained. So I think that's got to be our sort of starting point. But I think that's manageable within any changes that happen. But we just need to ensure that we keep that sort of distinctive voice around rail travel in particular as things change. But I think we're in a good position. I think the dialogue between the two organisations is good. I think it's very open. Emma certainly fights the corner where need be, and that's good. And I think the point that's in the report about Emma's role as part of the management team, I think, is important as well. So these things are just being now set out slightly more clearly than they were in the first agreement. So we will form the Transport Focus board have considered this, and they're comfortable with signing off the changes. Just formally, we need to do the same. So I'm assuming from comments that people are comfortable with the changes as set out in the report. So we'll sign that off as, and we'll make sure the agreement is obviously updated, and a copy will be circulated so everybody's got that, and we will have that on the website as well, so that people know what the agreement is what it contains. Okay, well, thanks for that, and thanks, Emma, for all the work in. It's always difficult coming brand new into a new organisation, and then that organisation changes its partnership arrangements at the same time. Perhaps it was a good thing. And we're throwing an odd pandemic as well, of course, just to keep you on your toes. But
yeah, it's only a year on that I realised what a kind of double whammy it was. Really, I was kind of new as the director to London TravelWatch, and I found myself in a new partnership as well that had never happened before and been tested. So I've learned a lot in the last year, and that has kind of we've learned a lot of lessons, both of us, and I think made adjustments accordingly. But yeah, it's been an interesting experiment that gone all right so far.
Yeah. No, well, thanks very much for that. Okay, let's move on then to casework reports, which and Susan will touch on this, but casework was a key, one of our sort of key contributions really in terms of the partnership. And again, no one expected the chaos that ensued after March last year, but credit to Susan and the team. You've managed to adapt amazingly in that time, and with the changes that are happening to the Ombudsman as well. There's been a lot on your plate, Susan, but I'm sure you'll talk us through that now, and we can have a discussion.
And Susan, by the way, you missed, I think I was just mentioning in my update before you arrived that you casework got a 5-star review from Transport Focus for the way that your team have been handling their cases. So that's really good news and not unexpected.
Thank you. So
right. Well, with that fanfare, Susan.
So I submitted 2 papers this time. So obviously we're not at the end of the first quarter where I run all the very, very lengthy reports. So I did attach the reports from the last quarter, which would be quarter 4 of the last financial year. And then I did a little just London TravelWatch only update paper just to let everybody know where we are and what we're doing. I've been working with Transport Focus because I think that casework could be better. I think we could better manage passengers' expectations. So I've already started it for London TravelWatch with Ventrica, who are our external contractors. They've started out very softly sending out and managing expectations documents to passengers. And I'm kind of slightly disappointed I haven't had any feedback at all. Even if it was negative, that's still feedback. It gives you something to work on, but nobody has said absolutely anything. So I think Transport Focus now have agreed that they would like to do it as well. I'm just waiting for that document to come over to me, and we'll do a soft launch with that. And we'll give it a month or so, and if it works well, then we'll roll it out. So it's just part of the acknowledgement that we use for passengers. And it just gives us the opportunity then to manage passengers' expectations from the very beginning, all the way through the way their case is handled. And then when we get round to doing the survey, which I hope we'll have a satisfaction survey by the end of this year, you'll be able to draw a line from when the passenger first contacted us all the way through to the questions we ask in the survey. I don't know if anyone's got any questions about either of the paper or.
Has anyone got anything?
Sorry, I was late joining today, and I'll go off again straight away. We have a new member of staff with us today, so I'm spending my day helping him get set up and ready to be a caseworker. Good.
Well, it's good to have someone new helping. Alan, I think you wanted to raise.
Very briefly, thank you, Susan, as ever, very thorough and useful reports. I noticed in the second report a comment about looking at options to record the amount of time spent on each case. From my experience of time recording systems in the past, they can become very overly burdensome. Their benefit far underwhelms the effort involved. I wondered whether you might just comment where you got to and what you're looking at. I wouldn't want the team to be hindered in the excellent work that they've been doing.
No, I completely agree with you. It's just that particularly this year, we've noticed that we've had a lot of people come to us who maybe require further support. And it's a good way of measuring more KPIs that targets the pressure that a caseworker can be under just dealing with one case, because they need to spend more time on them. We don't know whether we can use the time recording function on CRM yet, but we have looked at a workaround where the caseworker can record whether a particular case is what we would call a long case. So then I'd be able to report on that probably at the end of quarter 2, because obviously it has to go through its entire cycle and they have to enter the information for me to be able to pull it off and report on it. But I should be able to show not only how many cases we've had, but how many of them have required further support, or it's just that the caseworker just doesn't believe that the outcome is the right one and it's kept going back and back and back until they've achieved a really good outcome. I mean, I closed a case last week that'd been open for a year, and it was a successful outcome, but it was a difficult, long, challenging, not the passenger, it was just the complaint and the challenges we had with the rail operator. But we got there, and I think sometimes it just takes that extra effort. And as long as the industry is still willing to engage with us, then we keep going. And obviously the passenger knows what we're doing as well. We keep them informed. So, you know, I do agree with you, Alan. I don't think all the time having absolute statistics work, but I do think it gives a really good example of if we would ever need further resources, and I would be able to not only provide verbal support for that, I would actually like to be able to provide evidence to say, you know, we're having challenges.
I'm all in favour of evidence and measuring our effort and return. So I will watch this with interest as it evolves. Thank you, Alan.
Susan, could I just ask, when the flexible ticketing comes in, are you expecting that to create a greater workload for the team? We don't know all the detail at this stage, so perhaps it's too early, but that's going to be quite a change, isn't it, in the way that people think about ticketing?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, one of the questions I've started to see the passenger charters come through now as they get updated. And one of the questions that us and Transport Focus continually ask is the terms and conditions around flexible ticketing. They need to be, you know, to claim for delay repay needs to be exactly the same. And the how the refund is calculated, that needs to also be very clear in the passenger charter as they are for season tickets. So people can claim. The ones I've seen at the moment, the flexi tickets are all bought via the TOC smart card. So any delay repay compensation will be fairly automatic as far as they can. So I can't see it affecting them. Where I am concerned is for those TOCs who are offering carnet tickets, because carnets are a lot more difficult to kind of get the workaround, and refunds, again, not so much for delay repay, but if a passenger wanted to surrender the entire thing. I don't think we'll see an uplift in casework straight away, maybe possibly later in the year as it's rolled out and people are using them more, and obviously as people return to work as well.
Okay, and what sort of input do you think you'll be able to have as that evolves? Because partly there's going to be learning, I would imagine, for the train companies themselves and possibly government. Is that something you're going to be able to have input on?
I think so. I mean, when the National Rail Conditions of Travel will be they've just been updated, and they'll have to be updated again to reflect these. we'll be able to have input into that and to make sure that the refunds rights of passengers are fair, and if they're not, we'll be able to challenge that. Right. But as I say, I think I've done 3 passenger charters in the past couple of weeks, and the question we've asked every single one is for clarity on flexible ticketing, although like I say, it does seem that at the moment most of the flexible ticketing seems to be around the smart technology all of the TOCs operate, but most of a very large proportion, I wouldn't say most, but a very large proportion of passengers within London will travel around using contactless and Oyster because they're in the zones. Yeah. It's only for those who come just slightly outside our geographical remit. But obviously for Transport Focus, then that will be slightly different. So it's quite good that we're working across both organisations now, because the learning covers everything. So it will actually work in our favour.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be really, well, it's great that you're so closely involved in this, Susan. I'm just conscious that what might be quite simple in London is unusual. Usually that's complicated in London and simpler elsewhere. I think on this one, it could be the reverse. As you say, there's a system that's fairly well known in London. That's going to be quite a big change, I think, to other parts of the country. So you may find you've got a bit of an extra workload from that, but I'm guessing at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Arthur, one of the challenges we may have in the future, and I say may because I don't know, Transport for London do offer auto delay compensation where it's appropriate for them to do so. And I would try to challenge the operators to do the same thing if they have that information and where the passenger's been travelling and they know that train's been delayed, to be able to offer the same solutions for them so passengers don't have to claim. But I just don't think we're there yet, you know, because I do actually think the TOCs are running to try to keep up at the moment as well. So they're being told to do something and not really given the instruction to carry it out. I think, yeah, I'm not too concerned about it at the moment. Now, I've said that, I'm going to regret that, aren't I? But I'm sure as we go along, we'll be able to make the right challenges to ensure that the passengers are properly represented as they come back to work. Great.
Okay, no, well, that's good to hear. And anyway, your assurance is recorded anyway, Susan. So we've got it on the record now.
Thanks, Arthur.
No, I'm sure that's going to be absolutely fine. Any other questions for Susan? No. Okay. Thanks, Susan, for all your work, and I know all the discussions going on with Transport Focus that we're not seeing at the moment, but I know it's taking a lot of time to make sure you've got the best system going forward, and I appreciate all the effort that you're putting in on that. So thanks.
Okay, I'm going to go again now, so to go back to my new stuff.
You head off and go and meet your new colleague. All right. Thanks, Susan. Okay. Bye.
Chair, I'm gonna dip out now because it seems like a good moment, and I'll be back at 11:40. So you either might have to talk very slowly for the next item, or consider having a few-minute tea break. Okay. But I'm hoping to be back in time for the finance report.
Yeah, that's great. No, it'd be good to have you here for that. So we will. Anyway, I hope your talk goes well. I'm sure it will, and we'll see you in a few minutes, Emma. Thank you. Right. Richard, you've got the opportunity now to use the time. You can talk as slowly as you like. No, you can. There's a lot of information in your report, so I'm sure we'll be able to talk that through. Maybe it has a short break before we do the finance report. But if you want to take us through the impact report, that'd be good.
Thanks, Arthur. So I've split the reports are split into two. One for the sort of stats and details are in the confidential section, but I'll take you through the first one, which focuses on the successes and the media stuff first. It's quite a bit of overlap with Emma's report on the successes, so I won't necessarily repeat those. But going forward, we're going to streamline that a bit and just focus on the successes in Emma's, I think, so we get everything in that one to make it easier. But I think the things I'd like to draw attention to, we had some good interviews. It was bearing in mind there was a pre-election period, so things were quieter for quite a large part of the time under review. We did well, I think, to get a couple of interviews on LBC, a couple on Bloomberg Radio who approached us and seemed keen to perhaps work in the future with us a bit more as well. The buses, obviously we've talked a lot about them, but they're very LBC are very interested in the decision to increase TfL's decision to increase bus capacity on the 17th of May. So we did something on that, and another one on the TfL funding deal. On Bloomberg, we did them about the priorities for the new mayoral term and the Williams Rail Review. So I think what we've been very, very good at recently is getting responses out very, very quickly when decisions are made or reports come out. So we're becoming the first port of call for people like Bloomberg or LBC, which I think is really pleasing. The apps work Emma mentioned, where we showed that the Google Maps outperforms TfL Go and does a better job in terms of crowding and busyness, has proved really, really popular. And the fact that it was picked up by the BBC, I think, really helped us, because I've never seen a particular article drive traffic to our website as much as that one. So that was really, I think, really worth flagging up. Mm-hmm. And you can see in the appendix that we've got quite a lot of varied coverage, including the local press and trade press probably as well. So I think that's where I'll leave it, but I'm happy to take any questions that you've got.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Anyone want to comment or ask questions on Richard's report? Just sorry, Laura, I see your hand. Yeah.
Thanks, Arthur. And thanks, Richard. As always, really enjoy the reports. It was just a question about looking ahead. Obviously, we've just had an extension to when the next lot of restrictions will lift. And I wondered if what you've learned from the last quarter and what about and what's coming ahead of this means there are particular activities you have planned when restrictions finally do lift, and how we might be thinking about that sort of over the summer and into the autumn. I know that's slightly out of scope, but just be interested to know how this is shaping your forward thinking. Yeah, thanks, Doris. That's a very good question. I mean, I think we thought about what we would do ahead of when we assumed that yesterday was going to be the lifting, and obviously we reviewed our position. But I think we were always looking at whether it's worth reviewing our review of apps to see if TfL have made any progress in making things more real time, and so I think that's something that we're probably going to look at in a few weeks, because they say that by the end of June that they should have improved. Using Wi-Fi, picked up Wi-Fi data and better perhaps loading data, or have a better indication of real-time busyness and crowding. So I think that's something we'll probably look to do. And some of the work, obviously the bus work and the personal security work we talked about, they'll I'm sure feed into it. But also we combine our thoughts with the findings in the omnibus surveys that Transport Focus produce every week, and just look at the trends there, and it looks like a tipping point's being reached at the moment, with increasing numbers of people travelling and satisfaction starting to go down, probably as a result of that. So we'll keep an eye on those and see if they if we need to do any work sort of highlighting that and concerns which passengers might have returning to transport. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Can you just check on Bloomberg? What you mentioned they might like to do something more regularly with us. Is there any more discussion about that, or any information you can let us have?
Well, we've done the two. They sort of said that a bit like LBC, I suppose, they'd like to have a bit of a open dialogue as and when there's something of that might be of interest to their listeners, they'll get in touch. So nothing concrete regular has come up, but I suppose it really depends on they're a bit like City AM for the sort of radio, if you like. They're sort of a business driven. So it's the mayoral priorities, I think, really chimed with them, because they were looking at people coming back to work and how the mayor's transport priorities might chime with business, so the TfL cuts as well, perhaps. But nothing at the moment in the pipeline, but I'll keep you updated.
Okay, no, that'd be good. And just as we have a return to work, hopefully by whatever it is, August, September time, this idea of people sort of coming to our site and getting information across a number of modes of travel would seem to be quite a useful opportunity for us. But is that, and you say you were geared up really for the 21st of June, but is there more work that you'd want to be doing ahead of that now to set us up for that? Is there any more resource you need, do you think, for that?
Well, I think we talked before Henry, about bite-sized sort of consumer content. There are things we'll certainly be publicising. The capping on TfL services for people not travelling, 5 days a week, and things like the new flexi season tickets. We'll put information up about that, yeah, just various other things that people might find useful. Responding to particular concerns that perhaps are raised in the omnibus work or picked up in the media. So yeah, we're certainly working on that. Yeah, we've got and the app review, of course. Yeah, telling people if things change on that.
Yeah. And the app review for the moment, though, we'll just leave that as it is until a point in the future, perhaps when they have larger numbers coming back. Is that the thinking?
Well, TfL are supposed to be having this improved information by the end of the month using real-time data. So we'll monitor that, and if they do make big strides on it, we'll update that and keep people informed. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So if no one has any other questions for Richard, I assume not, could we just take a break then for perhaps just for 15 minutes, because conscious with Emma being at her conference, I'd like to have Emma here for the finance report. So if it's okay with people, can you just take a break, and we'll come back for why don't we say 25 to 12? How does that suit? Okay. All right. Thank you. Welcome back. We'll just wait a couple of minutes for the others. We will need to wait for Shahid, so he should be with us fairly soon, I hope. Just while I'm waiting for Shahid and of course Emma coming back, one of the things I'm trying to do is arrange a meeting with the London Assembly, with the Transport Committee and board members. I just wonder if you might let me know any dates that you're planning to go away, perhaps during, well, late July, probably into August. It's probably a question that's a bit redundant. If I'm going to be going too far, I don't suppose, but if there's any times where you're just not going to be around, it'd be useful to know, and then we'll try and put something into diaries. But I know it'll be a challenge, and it may end up being September realistically, but if we could do something in the summer, it'd be useful. So so particularly for Alan and Karen, but we'll see how we go on that.
Yes,
Go on, Karen.
Go on, Alan.
Alphabetically, go on, you go first.
I was only going to say I've got nothing planned. I'm not sure I trust enough knowing what's going to be possible to take the risk at the moment.
No.
Yeah, likewise. I'm not planning on any holidays, particularly. Yeah, I've got some other bits of work in, but nothing for nothing for an extended period. So
yeah.
Pick a day that's cool. That would be my that would be my request.
Okay, well, I'll try and do that. It may be beyond my powers, Karen, but I will give it a go.
Come on.
People are telling me that now's the opportunity to go and do all the touristy bits of London, because they need our support, and they're particularly, I mean, not quite empty, but they're pleasant places to be at the moment. So
yeah, in fact,
I think that's my plan.
Yeah, I'm planning to do a couple of days in London in August, which I don't think I've ever done that before. So it'll be a novelty, and one of the world's great cities. So why not take advantage if we can, if it's a bit quieter? Yeah. Shahid, good to see you back. Sorry we got slightly delayed with that. So, but thanks for fitting in. Now I know Jackie, as she said earlier, she's had to go for to help her daughter with a medical appointment. Laura may have got waylaid, so why don't we start anyway? Emma, I'm sure will be with us any moment, and obviously she knows what's in the report. But if there's any discussion, hopefully she'll be with us ready for that. So, do you want to take us just through the detail of the report?
Of course, Arthur.
Thank you.
Okay, so excuse me. So the figures that you've had are to the 30th of April. The year-to-date costs are pretty much, they are in fact in line with forecast. The main thing to note is that we've had the grant and aid funding from the GLA has been paid in full. So we've got the full year was paid on the 1st of April. In the accounts, we profile that, so we sort of drip feeding it in month by month, just to make the accounts look a little bit more sensible.
Yeah.
In terms of the budget and the forecast, you can see there's a variance of £47,000 for the year. I think to explain that, it's probably easiest to start with looking at the reserves. So at the 1st of April, the provisional opening balance was a deficit of £2,000. That was made, well, it was due to the way we funded the redundancy cost last year. Yeah, and we had to fund those from the reserves. In reality, however, on the 1st of April, we've received the funds from the GLA, so that's pushed the balance back in there. It's pushed us back into a surplus for the year.
Yeah.
So the funding that we got for the year from the grant from the GLA included funding for one of the redundancy posts. So that has been included in the staff costs pay budget of 632. However, as I said previously, in reality, because we paid that last year, the forecast has been adjusted to reflect that, and we've moved £45,000 back into the reserves. Sorry, £47,000 back into reserves to get back to our sort of agreed level of 45,000, and the balance 26,000 has been made available in the campaign and project reserves, which has pushed that up slightly to 203,000. The 203,000 it includes £50,000 for the personal security project, £45,000 for the bus campaign, and £57,000 for external professional support. And the balance is available for other projects which are going to be scoped out over the course of the year. Any questions?
Okay, thanks. I see Emma and Laura with us. So we'll just go through the finance report, as you'll have gathered. So Shahid was just go through the report itself. But so if anyone's got any questions for Shahid, and then maybe Emma, if you wanted to add anything, do. But any questions for Shahid on the figures?
No, all pretty straightforward. Thanks.
Okay.
Not a question, just a thank you. Financial figures aren't my strength, and I think you make it particularly clear. So thank you, I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks for that, Shahid. Emma, is there anything you want to add around?
I missed Shahid's introduction, but I imagine it was pretty comprehensive, so I don't think I've got anything to add. Thank you, though.
No. Okay, good. Let me just check. And Shahid, that's both your papers combined. There's nothing else you want to add. That's fine. Yeah. Good. Okay. Good. Well, in that case, we've moved pretty quickly through the finance report. So thank you for that, Shahid, and yeah, thanks for making it so clear for us. So that's fine. So with that, unless there's any other business that anyone wants to raise, we can conclude the public section of the meeting. Does anyone have anything they want to raise in the public section? Richard, I'm assuming we haven't had any questions that have come to us that we need to pick up on.
We haven't, no.
No. Okay. Okay. Well, let's draw the public session to a close. I'd like to resolve to go into private session just for